Okay, you are all welcome to today's lecture. I think the administrator has started the recording, so if we wait for long, we are just going to waste the time. Emmanuel, Dominic, Vanessa, I hope everybody is doing fine. Great, great, great. Okay, so yesterday I think we did chapter 4 or lesson 4, where we looked at the theories of development and underdevelopment. Uh, so just as we do anytime we meet, I would like to know. So what do you think the development is? Uh, yeah, what is development? Emmanuel, today is just the two of you here. So if you don't talk,
Hello.
yes, Emmanuel, you can go ahead.
Okay. In my own view, development is all about the qualitative and quantitative improvement in the living standard of people living together within a particular geographical area within a specified period of time.
Hey, big English. Oh, hey. Anyway, thank you. That was great. Yes, Desmond, do you have any view about the definition of the term development? Okay, if there is none, then let's go ahead. If you remember clearly, we also spoke about certain metrics for defining development. What are some of them, Vanessa? How can we measure development? We discussed 4 ways.
So, Doc, please, economic development, social development. Yeah, sir, please, Doc, please, I remember to.
Okay, I think you are looking at the types of development. That's what you just mentioned. But when we are looking at the ways of measuring development, we are looking at the ways in which we can measure to say, okay, so this country is performing better. These countries are in the developed category. These are in the underdeveloped category. I also mentioned that today there's also another way of defining development. They call some people the global north and the global south. So in all of that, there are so many metrics. Okay, we call them metrics or indexes for measuring development. And what they do is to simply grade countries to see who is performing better and who is not. Yesterday we looked at four of them. We looked at the GDP and then GDP per capita. We also looked at the Human Development Index. We looked at the Physical Quality of Life Index and then the Poverty Index. Yes, so as we still wait for the rest of your colleagues to join us, Mr. William, if we talk about the GDP or GDP per capita, what are we referring to?
Doc, please, can I help you?
Yes, you can go ahead.
Yeah. That's the total value of goods and service produced within a country.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember you were saying that if the GDP is high, then we are talking of the developed countries. And we, the developing countries, we have a low GDP.
That's great. That's great. In addition to that, you say that GDP is on its own it's not complete. But when you add the per capita, that's when you divide your total population by that amount, by the total value of goods and services produced in a country. Then, or you sorry, you actually divide the total value of goods produced in a country by your population. That is when you have GDP per capita. Always remember that per capita means per individual or per head. Okay, so a lower GDP per capita means a less developing country or a developing country. But the higher you have, the more developed you are. Unfortunately, the GDP, unlike the other indexes, does not have a range. Okay, because when you go to some of the other indexes, they are ranged between 0 and 1. Some are ranged between 1 and 100. But this one does not have a scale of measurement. Okay, but simply the higher the higher GDP per capita you have, it means the more developed you are. Essentially, when you look at it, you can see that if you have a higher GDP per capita, it means that it appears like almost everybody in the country is worth an amount of money. Okay, so if you share the country's wealth, if you share the the value of the country's total goods and services on everybody, everybody will be getting 2,000 Ghana cedis or 10,000 Ghana cedis. That is essentially what the GDP per capita means. If we sum up everything that has been produced in Ghana and we share it among Ghanaians, it means that everybody is going to have, let's say, 10,000 Ghana cedis or 5,000 Ghana cedis. So which means that the higher your GDP per capita, okay, then the more developed you are. I hope that has been made clear for you. We also went ahead to talk about the HDI, the Human Development Index. Desmond, if you are here, can you talk about the Human Development Index for us? Desmond doesn't want to talk. Emmanuel, can you talk about the Human Development Index for us? Okay, I think the guys are feeling shy to talk. So anyway, let's move on. So the Human Development Index essentially came about as a critique to the GDP, the usage of GDP to measure development, because there were other issues, essentially social issues that were
No,
not
my
being
place is
covered.
currently raining, so I hardly hear you.
Oh, okay, okay, that's fine, no problem. That's okay. So as I was saying, the Human Development Index came as a critique to the the GDP, the usage of GDP, because the GDP was looking at just the economic aspect of development, but other things that were mainly social issues were not being addressed, and so that's why the HDI was developed. And the HDI looked at adult literacy, life expectancy, and then GDP itself, but it measured it between 0 and 1, something that was not being done by the GDP. The HDI was ranging its performance of countries between 0 and 1. So the closer you are to 1, the better the performance. The further away you are from 1, the bad or the worse your performance. We also look at the physical quality of life index, among various other things. We also looked at the general characteristics of developing countries. When we talk about developing countries in general, what things do they have in common? You know that many of them they have problems of the low levels of human capital, the low levels of living and productivity. We also know that there's high levels of poverty, okay, and inequality. They also have high population growth rate. Among all the problems they have, they still find time to give birth to so many people. Then there's also greater social fractionalization, where we talked about the fact that there are so many different levels of division that exist in these developing countries. And the problem does not exist in the fractionalization or the division. It lies in the fact that it is difficult to then bring people who have different ideologies, beliefs, and interests on board to achieve a single purpose. Okay, that is where the problem lies. Yes, and then we looked at certain theories of development. The modernization theory that essentially spoke about how many countries have today adopted modern ways of doing things, modern thinking, and even imprinted these kind of modern values into their culture. And so development takes a cultural dimension. So embedded in people's culture is the will and the desire to develop, to improve. Okay, looking at values like punctuality, hard work, and achievements. Okay, whereas the developing countries, they are mostly reluctant or they delay in accepting and adopting development. Okay, and so the argument for the people who the proponents of the modernization theories is that when developing countries eventually adopt some of these modern values, the modern ways of doing things, they would eventually develop to reach the level of what the high income or developed countries. We also looked at the theory of stages of growth that outline the whole process, the entire process that a country can take to get developed. And they were 5 in number. And the idea was that you start from an agrarian society where you mostly farm to feed yourself, and then you progress through the stages or the ranks primarily by investment. Okay, and then you reach that high level of mass consumption at the final stage. We also finally looked at the dependency of world systems theory, which was essentially a mirror of something that we've done before, essentially in the growth pole concepts and then the core periphery theory. Okay, where we're looking at the fact that the economies of developing countries have been tied to growth in the developed countries. And so their economy is more or less like a pool of resource. They just come and take the raw materials and the labor away, but these countries are left to their own fate. Okay, and so they become more or less dependent. That's the whole idea. They become dependent on other countries, relying on them for things like grants, like loans, like technocrats and other stuff. Okay, all right. So essentially that was what we did yesterday, and so today we are going to move on to the other aspect. Please, we are not going to treat this topic that we are going to do today again. And we all agreed last week that we are going, yesterday, sorry, that we were going to have the lecture today. So the rest of your colleagues who are not here, they should try and join. Okay. Okay, so today we are going to look at the third aspect of the topic or the course. We are beginning with the third aspect of the course. If you remember clearly, we started with the regional aspects, where we looked at issues about location, general issues about location, the locational theories, the concept of location, distance, and direction. We've done all of that extensively. Then we came down to look at, yesterday we started with the developmental aspect of it, the theories of development and the development as we just went over. Today we are looking at the development planning perspective. And so essentially we are coming to the end of the whole course. And I hope by this time the idea or a broader perspective about the course is being made in your mind by now. So today we are going to look at development planning in perspective. But first of all, planning. When we say someone is planning for something, you should understand that planning is not so technical of a word or a term or a concept. In our daily lives, we plan almost each and every day, from issues about wedding. I mean, people trying to get wedded, they'll plan ahead of time, the colors they will use, the type of food they are going to consume, things like that. The venue, all of those things will be planned for ahead of time. Even in your own daily lives, I don't know, maybe a number of you may have children and you have an amount of money that you plan to spend within the day. And I learned you guys are, I think many of you be in the basic schools by now. And so you are resuming school somewhere 2nd September. Okay. So at the beginning of the vacation, then you plan that, okay, so I am going to use this amount of money for the vacation so that by the time school resume, I will have this amount of money left. All of those things are centered on what? Planning. So planning in a very uh, uh, typical sense looks at preparations for the future. Okay, you are just preparing yourself for the future. Now, let's read what it says in the slide. It says that planning is the fundamental management function which involves deciding beforehand what is to be done, when it's to be done, and how it is to be done, and even who is going to do it. So essentially, anything and everything that is going to happen, you plan for it beforehand. That's the idea. You plan beforehand what you are going to do at the specific time you are supposed to do it, how you are even going to go about it, and who is going to do the whole thing. Okay, so Hirashka in 1933 defined planning as the pre-thinking and pre-arranging things before an event takes place so as to achieve good results in health, convenience, comfort, and happiness of all living beings. So it also carries the same concept, doing things beforehand, pre-thinking. So you decide ahead of time, you arrange ahead of time before something takes place. Okay, and Conyers and Hales in 1984 also defined planning as a continuous process, okay, which involves decisions or choices about alternative ways of using available resources with the aim of achieving particular goals in the future. So generally, Conyers and Hales, their definition for planning is what is widely accepted. Okay, so just as development was that we mentioned yesterday, we said development is a continuous process. It is not a destination. It is the same thing that is about planning as well. Planning is not a destination. It's not a final product. It is a continuous process because by the time you get to the end, you would have learned certain things that would inform your next line of action. And so the process or the cycle continues again. Okay, but generally it is just about decisions or choices about doing diverse things, okay, to achieve a particular goal. Because in the grand scheme of things, everything that you are doing should have a goal. At the end of this, what do I seek to achieve? Do I want to conserve money? Do I want to conserve energy? Do I want to make my wedding the best wedding in the world? Do I want to allocate enough resources that I don't use it so much? Okay, so that is one of the main characteristics of planning towards achieving a particular goal. Now, there are two broad forms of development planning, which is centralized and decentralized planning. Okay, now let's go into it. For the centralized planning, it means that decisions are not taken independently at the local level, but holistically at a more central level. It is a process of achieving an option of it is the process of achieving the objectives of development which lie in the hands of government or the highest authority of any institution, whether public or private. So, with the centralized planning, it looks at decision making at the highest level. At the highest level. So, decision is not taken independently at the lower levels or at the grassroots. Okay, everything is done from the top. And so some people, another name for the centralized plan, some people call it the top-down approach. So decisions are taken at the top or at the center and then brought down to the lower levels. Okay. Now let's break this into realistic context. So assume that Ghana's government does not have any local government available. There are no MMBAs, there are no regional coordinating councils or regional ministers. Okay, it is just the president and his cabinet that is ruling the country. Okay, that would be a centralized development planning or government. Okay, so everything the president Mahama will decide everything with his cabinet, and then they'll come down to the lower levels and then implement without consulting anybody. That is a centralized administration. Another form is where you have, let's say it is an organization or a firm or a school. Let's use a private school like many private schools have in Ghana. You realize that the decision making is done at the top. Maybe the proprietor or the manager will be the one with in conjunction with maybe the board of directors. They would make their decisions. The teachers have no say. The parents have no say. The children have no say. The students. And so decision is top down. That is a centralized administration. Okay, so decision making concerning development and everything lie in the hands of the government or the highest authority in any institution, whether public or private. Now, Cornwell said that the explanation of centralized planning by looking at the relationship between the higher authority and lower tiers of authority in the centralized system of development planning. He concluded that the relationship the latter has is that no autonomy in the administrative duties and the execution of the decision of top management. So I mean, there are certain typographical errors in the whole text, but then essentially what they are trying to say is that the lower levels, they do not have any autonomy. They do not have any power. They are not mandated to take any decisions on their own. They may exist, all right, yes. In some jurisdictions, they may exist. There may be lower levels, but the lower levels, they don't have any power, any control over the use of their resources, over certain decisions that they are going to make. And so they rely on the central government or the central authority for everything. Let me give you another example. So it's although Ghana has a local government, essentially they are not empowered to take decisions on their own. If they need to spend certain amount of money, they must write to the central government for funds to be disbursed to them, for them to then begin to make certain or take certain steps or make certain decisions. Okay, and so they may exist, the lower levels may exist, all right, but they do not have the power. They do not have the authority to make decisions about control and use of resources. I hope you are getting it clear. That is a centralized development planning or administration. Okay, so especially in terms of administrative duties, the lower levels do not have autonomy in the execution of the decisions of top management. Now, but we know that aside everything, the centralized planning also has certain advantages. Now, it is easier to develop uniform policies and practices in a centralized organization. Moreover, it can effectively achieve conformity to prescribed procedures and can bring about better coordination among the various units and levels of the organization. So, in a centralized government or in a centralized administration, it is easy to develop uniform policies because you don't have too many people to consult. You don't have to go and seek the approval of the various stakeholders. If it is a school, is there a question? Someone says they can't see my screen. Is it all of you who can't see my screen?
I can see.
I can see your screen. So the person should log out and come back.
Okay. So Desmond, you can log out and come back. All right. So as I was saying, it is much easier to develop uniform policies because the people whose views and opinions are required for developing such policies are few. They are few. Take for instance the school I mentioned. If it's a private school, it is just the manager, the proprietor, the board of directors. They may be just up to about 5 people. And so you can decide to meet on one day, one Saturday afternoon or morning, and then you decide everything about the new academic year that you are going to start. And it is so easy because they don't have so many people with diverse interest. Because the moment you bring on board teachers, the moment you bring on board PTA, the moment you bring on board students, remember that each of these groups have their own interest. The student will have a different view, the parents will have a different view, the teachers will also have a different view. And so it will be difficult to then reconcile all of these interests into one. And so for a centralized planning administration, it is easier to develop uniform policies. And there's also the idea that there are laid down procedures for doing things. In every administration, there are laid down procedures of doing things. Now, in a centralized administration, it is easy to follow such steps because you don't have to go out of the box to consult somebody to do this and do that. No, it is involving just a few people, and so coordination is much easier. All right, so that's the first advantage. Now, secondly, when authority is centralized at the top level, it is easier to identify the key persons who exercise real power and authority. If the process of centralization is properly adhered to, duplication can be avoided. So, in a centralized administration, as I mentioned, it is just few people who wield or who handle everything. Let's take Ghana as a centralized state, for instance. Maybe the president, the finance minister, the security, the minister of defense, or something like that. And maybe let's just add maybe the minister of education and something like that. Okay, let's take just about 5 people. Now, these 5 individuals, they have distinct roles or distinct responsibilities they are supposed to achieve. If anything should go wrong, you know who exactly you are supposed to go and address. If the economy is not going on well, it is not that now that you are going to look at who and who is supposed to do this or who and who is supposed to do that. Something that is very typical in our road and railway system, because there is Ministry of Railways and Transport, and then there's the roads minister, and realize that it becomes difficult to address who is responsible for the poor road network in the country. Okay, and sometimes some people may be performing the same role, that is duplication, but in a centralized state, because the idea is that you are limiting the number of people who have power. You can even avoid duplication because the road minister is solely handling roads, education is doing education, finance is doing finance. They don't have overlapping, or in a case where someone may be performing something that someone else should be doing. No. Okay, so it is easy to identify the key persons who exercise real power because the number is few. The number is few. Now, thirdly, it says that centralization can promote full use of available resources, such that centralized decision making leads to greater regional equality because the government regulates the distribution of resources among regions and counteracts inequalities. Now, when practiced properly, centralization can lead to equality or equity in the distribution of resources, in the sense that they don't rate someone over the other. Let's take Ghana once again as a centralized state. If the government wants to share 1 billion or 1 million Ghana cedis for every region, let's say 100 million for every region in the country, they will not view Accra as greater than, let's say, the Western North because it was created new. No, they will view everybody on the same level. And so the distribution of available resources will be very easy. Unlike a situation where there are lower levels of government where people will then begin to advocate, oh, can't you see that Accra, we have more people here, we have many needs, and blah 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 blah. No. In a centralized state, the idea is that we are overseeing everything and everybody will get what they deserve. So you share everything equally. Okay, and so there will be limited inequalities as compared to a situation where you give people the chance to then air out their views and opinions. You realize that, oh, even based on population alone, people in Accra may be advocating for more. Based on the abundance of resources, people in the north may be asking for more because vegetation, minerals, and other things may not be so abundant over there. And so they will be thinking that they should be getting more. But in a centralized state, everybody gets equal distribution. I hope you get it. So these are the three advantages of centralization. Easy to develop uniform policies. It is also easy to identify key persons who hold real authority, and then promotion of the full use of what available resources. However, there will be certain disadvantages as may be running through your mind already. Number one is that all the lower levels are dependent on top management, and if emergencies arise at the lower levels, they do not have any decision-making authority. And this is true because if in the time of an emergency, you have to call somebody at the top that, what should I do? Can I do this? Can I do that? Then by the time such life-saving activities or interventions are implemented, some people may have died or the situation could have gotten worse. Why? Because decision making is done at the top, especially in terms of the disbursement of funds or the use of funds for certain things. If you have to call someone to give you money to do something, what if you call at a time and the person will now have to take their time to even meet and then decide that, okay, instead of 5,000 that we'll give you 3,000. Okay, so in such a situation, the money that you need for that particular activity will not be given to you, and then whatever you need to do with the money will be lost. Okay, so that's one of the main disadvantages. That's one of the main disadvantages. Secondly, we say that the centralized executive might not understand the needs of the lower spheres correctly. We know that in Ghana, or let me not even say in Ghana, everybody on this particular course, for instance, we all have our different needs. Males have their needs, females have their needs. Even when you go into the females, different people, there are different needs for different persons. Even the males, people have different needs. So if I, as your tutor, decide to do something for you, let's say organize a party at the end of this meeting or this course, and then I decide that on my own, I'm going to do Gary Soakings for everybody. Some people may not appreciate it because not everybody eats Gary Soakings. But if I had asked that the males, what would you like? Oh, yepe fufu, yepe banku, we want this, we want that. The females, what do you like? Oh, we want Indomie, we want rice, we want jollof. Okay, if I'm able to factor all of that in, then I will understand what you want. But for a centralized administration, such things do not exist because your views, first of all, are not even considered when it comes to decision making. Everything is done at the top. And that is why, once again, we call it what? The top-down approach. Secondly, there is limited understanding of the concept of delegation of authority since top-level administration has the final say. Now, in administration or in governance, there's something we call delegation. Delegation essentially means that I give you some authority to do something. I give you some power to do something. So, for instance, your headmaster may be having a meeting with the circuit supervisor or the GES officer for your district. Okay, And so he would then give, or he would delegate authority to your assistant headmaster or somebody, okay, to handle the school in his stead. That is essentially delegation, or even ask such a person to even go to represent him at the meeting. That is also another form of delegation. But essentially, it means that some level of authority or power or decision making, because whatever you do in the absence of whoever has delegated you holds or stands. If it is in terms of voting and you vote in a particular way, the headmaster cannot come and say that why did you vote like this? No, because he or she has delegated you. Essentially, he has empowered you to do something. But this does not exist in centralized states because everything is done where? At the top. They do not delegate power or administration to people at the lower levels. And that is why decisions are still done at the top. Now, lastly, it says that only a single individual can wield real power, and this creates a breeding ground for corruption. So, cast your mind back to many of the countries that today are experiencing wars and instabilities and what have you. Many of them realize that some particular person in government is the one controlling everything. And there's a saying that power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts what? Absolutely. So when one person begins to have excess authority, excess power, the person begins to feel like he or she is on top of the world, and some begins to take some decisions or certain actions that will breed corruption essentially, because he controls the finances of the country. He controls the availability and the distribution of resources in the country. So if that person decides to start stealing your money, there's nothing you can do. Is that okay? So these are the disadvantages of a centralized administration. Let's move on to the other side. So we have centralized on one side, we have decentralized on the other side. Now this, you should know that this will be basically the opposite of a centralized administration, referring to the process of planning where some, you should understand this word here, some. It means that not everything, some of planning functions and responsibilities of decision making are delegated. Okay, that's the whole idea. Some functions are delegated to from the center to the lower levels of administration. People are not merely beneficiaries, but also participants in the formulation and execution of development plans. So the whole idea is that in a decentralized state, okay, in a decentralized state, certain functions and certain decision-making authorities are delegated to the lower level. So they are allowed to make certain decisions on their own as it affects them. And so the way in which the MMDA, the Greater Accra Municipal Assembly or something, or maybe let's say Tema West Municipal Assembly, the way they will use their funds for an activity will be different from the way someone in Bono region, or let's say Tano North Municipal Assembly, will use their resources, because they have different needs and they have each been empowered to do something that benefits them. However, in a centralized state, the state would have done something for them that everybody would adhere to, whether you like it or not. But in a decentralized state, everybody is empowered to do something for themselves, which means that you are not just mere beneficiaries. You don't just sit somewhere for people to do something to benefit you, but you are participants, because you then have to draw a plan. And that is why in Ghana, I think almost every year or 2 years or so, they come to the various municipal assemblies, and then they draw the midterm development plan and all those things. That is essentially for people in the community and officials at the lower levels to bring their views on board. In this community, in this town, in this district, this is what we need. So you take part in the formulation and execution of plans. Now, its main objective is to make better informed decisions and also gives people a greater voice in decisions concerning their development and welfare. So it allows for better informed decisions, where now the people who are going to execute, they are not going to execute based on what they know or what they think, but they know that, okay, so people in Ashaiman want good roads, but people in Obuasi, they need hospitals. People in Ho, they need this. Okay, so whatever decision that is going to be made is going to be an informed decision. All right. Let's move on to the advantages. Now, elite capture of development programs is eliminated. So elite capture is essentially where decisions are taken by the few knowledgeable people, quote unquote. Okay, the few knowledgeable or technocrat people. That is elite capture, and it is eliminated because whoever it is, once you are a stakeholder is essentially someone who has interest in something. You have an interest, so it may be you may be a local in the community, you may be a visitor, you may be a migrant, you may be an investor, a private individual, whoever you are. Once it concerns you, you are a stakeholder, and so that's situation where decisions will be taken by the few knowledgeable people will be eliminated. Secondly, spatial development and needs of local people are well met through decentralized planning. So the local people, they have their views eventually, addressed or taken care of because you are present when everything is going on. If it is the problem of bad roads, you are present, and so you are going to take part in the decision making. Okay, if it is water that you need, you are present in the decision making or in the meeting, and so you can then speak. Okay, all right. Now, decentralized planning is also cost effective as solutions are found out locally with the involvement of what stakeholders. Now, in a centralized state, on the other hand, sometimes they would come and build. I don't know if you've noticed, but in many rural communities, when you are traveling along the road, you realize that you see some markets or some toilet facilities, some public toilets that people are not using, some boreholes that people are not using. Why? Because the people feel that they were not consulted. If they were consulted, the local people would have told them that, oh, the market, you can't build it here because the belief in the community is that this place is reserved for this particular god. And so because of that, we can't go there to be making noise and all of those things. Or they don't need a public toilet, they actually need something else. Okay. And then it is at that point that the government will know that, oh, okay, so the people don't need this, then they need something else. Now you are going to spend an amount of money. But in a decentralized state, on the other hand, because the views of people are taken into consideration, you do exactly what they want. And also, remember, the people also have their own idea. They have their own ways of doing things. And so they would bring their views and opinions on board, and that would be more cost effective. I hope you are getting it. So comparing decentralized to centralized administration or planning, you realize that decentralized planning is much more cost effective because you don't have to spend so much. You don't have to do try and error. No. Okay. Now, fourth, it says that it promotes grassroots participation in development programs. So it helps in bringing on board everybody. It helps bringing on board everybody. So people then begin to feel that sort of belongingness. Okay, they can feel that, oh, they are appreciated in the community. And then lastly, it says greater mobilization and protection of resources. So when you bring people on board in a decentralized state or planning, you realize that their ability to freely give off resources is high because they feel like, oh, so this thing is going to help us. Say, for instance, if it is a classroom that they are going to build, you go to the community and you talk to them that we want to do something for you. What do you think would be best? Oh, let's build a classroom. Everybody agrees. How then do we get the resources? Oh, I I am a mason. I can help with the making of blocks. I am a carpenter. I can help with the roofing and the wood and everything. Okay, I am a painter. I can do this. So by the end of the day, you realize that you are able to mobilize resources and you even use less funds. Now, at the end of the project, you realize that these people can even protect these facilities much better because they feel like I use my own sweat and blood to build this, and so they protect it better as compared to a situation where the government will just come and dump a certain toilet facility on them. They wouldn't even mind when something is going wrong. And that is something that happens a lot in Ghana. You realize that many boreholes, when the borehole spoils, the assemblyman will call the regional minister, hey, we borehole now, say your borehole is spoiled too, your machine is spoiled. Okay. But in a situation where the people were consulted, even if it's the same borehole, they would know what to do when something goes wrong. I hope that is clear. Now, certain disadvantages include that it becomes more difficult to implement national policy and to coordinate sectoral activities, especially when national and local concerns do not coincide. So in situations where the local government or the local people want something, they want a classroom facility for their children, but the government, because they are politically elected, because they are promised in their manifesto that, oh, we are going to do one village, one dam. Now you see that there begins to become a conflict. There's a conflict because we want to do a dam for you, but you want a classroom. Whose view do we listen to? If we don't do the dam, then we've not fulfilled our manifesto. Okay. If we also if we don't do your school for you, you will not vote for us the next time. So then the problem comes in. Okay. Now, secondly, it says it is expensive, but it requires much money for training of personnel at the lower levels of government. So imagine how many MMDAs we have in Ghana, and we have about in excess of, I think, 270 or 280 or so currently. Imagine you have to train
275.
275. Thank you. Imagine you have to train all of these people. You have to pay all of these people, and that does not even cover the other staff in the assemblies. So it is very expensive to train people at the lower levels. It wouldn't be a problem if they were giving you value for money, but in our jurisdiction, we all know the problem that goes on. So these are the disadvantages, sorry, of the decentralized planning. But essentially, the decentralized planning is much more preferred in various jurisdictions. It's much more preferred because it is easier. It is much more simple. It is more convenient because in the end, you do what the people want and everybody is okay. So then let's look at certain principles of decentralized planning. Number one is the principle of functional clarity. The principle of functional clarity. Now, decentralized planning will be effective only when all the institutions and organizations involved in the planning process are clear about their roles and responsibilities. You remember one of the main advantages of the centralized system. We said that it is easy to identify who exercises authority and so in a decentralized state, things will be better if everybody is clear about their roles. The education minister knows he's in charge of education, and so he does not go to perform the role of a health minister. The roads minister knows he's in charge of transport, so he will not go and be interfering in things about energy. Okay, so when every institution, every person, every organization knows exactly what they are doing, that is essentially what we call functional clarity. Okay, you are clear, or you are clear exactly that you are clear about your functions, your role, your responsibility, what you are supposed to do. You do them as such. That will it will eliminate duplication of roles, and then it will make everybody know who is doing what. So if you don't perform your roles, you can't go and place the blame on somebody. Oh, this person didn't do this, that's why they couldn't do mine. No, because you know exactly what you're supposed to do. Now, there's also the principle of decentralized administration. Now, to perform the decentralized function, adequate administrative powers have to be devolved to achieve efficiency. So there are certain particular decision-making powers that must be allocated or devolved to the lower levels for proper decision-making or efficiency to take place. Number one is issues about employment, who to work at that level. Because you at the central level, yes, at the top level, you don't know the people in the community, you don't know who is qualified or not. But whoever is working at the lower levels know who is qualified. And so it is easier to bring them on board. Number two is the use of funds. The people must be empowered to use the money as is needed or as peculiar to them. It must not be a cut across thing where everybody is doing the same thing. If it is construction of gutters, everybody is constructing gutters. Maybe the people in town A need the money for something else. And so they must be empowered to use the money for whatever need is peculiar to them. That is the principle of decentralized administration, where adequate powers are allocated or are devolved to the right people. The right people, that is the idea. Powers are given to the right people. Now, there's also the principle of public participation. Now, for achieving success and efficiency in decentralized planning, public participation is an imperative. So embedded deeply in the whole concept of decentralized planning is the concept of public participation, where the views and opinions of everybody in the community or at the local level is taken care of. So this includes men, women, children, people living with disability, marginalized individuals like people of minority tribes or even foreign people or immigrants. So the views and opinions of all these people must be adequately catered for success to take place where in a decentralized state. Now, the next principle is the principle of what? Integration. Now, the hallmark of decentralized planning lies in integrating and harmonizing the plan documents of different sectors and units at all levels. So, aside the regional ministers, aside the health ministers and all, when you go to each MMDA, you realize that there's a health unit there, there's an education unit there, there's a security unit there, there are different units all over there. And so one important hallmark of decentralized planning is the ability for you to harmonize all the plans, bring everybody on board. So the health unit works hand in hand with the education unit, and that is why essentially you realize that sometimes the nurses and certain nurses come to the schools to educate the children. Okay, and all of this is harmonized with the physical planning department, where the location of certain infrastructure is well planned for, what we call land use planning and zoning. Okay, so one key hallmark of decentralized planning is where you are able to harmonize all the plans. You are able to bring everybody on board, and then everybody's role is made known to them. But then you also work hand in hand. There's some sort of interrelationship that takes place between you. All right. Now, then the last principle is a principle of financial availability and autonomy. Now, we all know that nothing can essentially take place without money. You can make all the big plans, you can do everything, but without the money to actualize the plans, it is not going to take place. And so institutions which are having responsibilities should have adequate resources and autonomy to spend the resources to discharge their responsibilities. You can't send a child or a student to go and get you wachi without giving the child money. How is the person supposed to go get there? Whose money is she supposed to use to buy the wachi? Okay, so whoever has been given a responsibility must be allocated with the right resources to discharge those duties effectively. All right. So these are also the responsibilities, sorry, the principles of decentralized plan. What have we done so far? So far, we've looked at the definition for planning. We then came down to look at the types of development planning. We have the centralized and decentralized. With the centralized, we are looking at the fact that decision making is done at the top. Okay, and then with the decentralized, it is more some, okay, some decision making authority is delegated to people at the lower level. Now, in all of this, we can see that planning is indeed important. Now, especially for underdeveloped or developing countries, planning is very important. Why? Because one, we need to remove unemployment. The need for planning in underdeveloped countries is further stressed by the necessity of removing widespread unemployment and disguised unemployment in such economies. Capital being scarce and labor being abundant, the problem of providing gainful employment opportunities to an ever-increasing labor force is a difficult one. So if you are able to plan and plan well, for instance, if you look at population, if you use population as a baseline, okay, you can know that, okay, with the rate at which we are giving birth, we can then estimate to see that if we don't take care in the next 5 years, we'll have so many people who will be unemployed. So let's plan, let's allocate these resources for this need or this use. Let's create more jobs. Let's do this, let's do that. So that by the time you get there, you will not be faced with the problem of what? Unemployment. And you remember, unemployment and low standards of living is one of the main characteristics of what? Developing countries. So when you are able to plan well, you are able to allocate resources better. And then jobs will be created for people to work, to earn enough for themselves, essentially improving what? Human capital. And human capital, as we know it from yesterday, includes things like health, education, and skill. Okay, so that's the first one, the need to remove unemployment. Another one is to ensure the balanced development of the economy. The absence of sufficient enterprise and initiative. Planning authority is the only institution for planning the balanced development of the economy. So the role of planners moves beyond what we know as the physical planning, stop work and produce permit. No, planning moves way beyond that. That's just a small aspect, what we call this, the physical planning. There's economic planning, there's spatial planning, there's transport planning. Okay, so planning is essential for balancing the development of an economy. So you don't just look at development in one sector, neglecting other sectors. Okay, or you also have to make sure that whatever growth is being experienced in the fishing industry spreads all the way to the farming industry, the transport industry, or whatever necessary sector is available in the country. And that is what will ensure what? A balanced development of the economy. So no particular sector is more advanced than the other. Everybody is at par. Is that okay? All right. Now, planning is also essential for removing poverty and inequalities. It is essential for removing poverty and inequalities. And if you remember, this is one of the main problems of, or one of the characteristics of underdeveloped or low-income countries. That is inequality and what? Absolute poverty, if you remember from yesterday. Now, the planning for development is key for removing the poverty of nations, for raising national and per capita income, reducing inequalities in income and wealth, and what have you. Planning is the only path open to underdeveloped countries. If you are able to plan well, you will then be able to allow certain strategic things to take place. For instance, you will not allow everything to be controlled by private individuals. Essentially, what happens in a capitalist economy. Because in a capitalist economy, the resources and decisions are largely taken by private individuals who hold money. But in a more decentralized state, okay, what you are going to essentially do is that you allow the state to take control. And if the state takes control, what do the states do? They ensure that there's equality. If you remember, from one of the advantages of a centralized state, they ensure that there is equal distribution of resources. So if you are able to do it and do it well, you realize that poverty will be reduced because everybody has something they can live on. Coupled with the fact that you are removing unemployment, as we discussed in the first point, poverty will be reduced or be eliminated, and then inequality where resources are held in the hands of a few people will also be eliminated because the state will then be in charge of everything. I hope the picture is getting clearer to you as we move on. Next, we look at the fact that planning is needed to increase the rate of economic development. Planning for the economic development implies external direction or regulation of economic activity by the planning authority, which in most cases identifies with the government or the state. This requires the raising of levels of income, saving, investments to boost economic development and what have you. So if you realize from transitioning from the previous government to this government, it took some time for even the dollar rate to go down. What do you think they did? They were planning for it. So over the years, they were taking certain decisions. And the decisions were then translated into what? Policies. And when they eventually got into power, such policies were implemented, for which case the current dollar rate is what we are observing. Okay, so one key thing that is required for economic development is planning. If you are able to plan and plan well, these plans will be translated into policies that will be implemented. What are some of these policies? Raising the levels of income, okay, saving and investment, and all of these essentially will boost the economy. Then cast your mind back to things within a growth pool and the core periphery. The idea that investment is what will lead to growth and expansion. And all of this can only be achieved when you plan. All right. So these are the needs, okay, why we need planning. Why essential, especially in the the underdeveloped or the developing countries. These reasons are why we need planning. All right. Now, when we move on to the requisites for successful development planning, what do we need? Now we know that planning is indeed important from the previous thing that we looked at, okay? From the need for development planning, we know that planning is important, essentially in removing unemployment, boosting economic development, reducing poverty and inequality and other reasons. Now we know that planning is important. But what do we need for successful development planning? What do we need? What are some of the things that we need to ensure that unemployment will be reduced and all of these things will be achieved? One, we need a planning commission. The first prerequisite is the setting up of a planning commission, which should be organized in a proper way. They should be divided and subdivided into a number of divisions and subdivisions under such experts as economists, statisticians, engineers, and what have you. So I hope you all know the body in charge of planning for Ghana. It is known as the National Development Planning Commission. Now, this commission is what oversees everything concerning planning in Ghana. So it's not just about the physical planning, as you mentioned, economic planning is there, transportation planning, everything is taken care of. Now, the planning commission should not exist as a centralized body, but should exist as a decentralized one where even in Ghana, we have the regional coordinating councils. So for every region, there are people who have been mandated to oversee activities at the regional level. The regional minister is there, regional statistician is there, regional health directorate is also there. Okay, now on the local level, these are even subdivided levels. You have the MMDs, you have the so you have the metropolitan municipal district assemblies, depending on the size. Okay, so all of these things go to say that there must be a certain body that is responsible for planning at all levels and dealing with different aspects of the economy. That's the first requisite, the first thing that you need for successful development plan. You need a commission to be put in place to ensure that activities go on smoothly. Secondly, you need statistical data. Now, a prerequisite for sound planning is a thorough survey of existing and potential resources of a country together with its deficiencies. Data pertaining to the available and potential natural resources, along with the degree of exploitation, agricultural, and a whole lot of things. So essentially, you need what? Statistical data. Why do you need the data in the first place? You can't plan in a vacuum. For instance, if you are going to plan for your wedding, you are not going to plan without knowing or estimating the number of people who are going to attend. What if you plan for 20 people and 200 people appear? How are you going to feed them? And so you need data. You need to then gauge and see, okay, so I have 50 people in my class. I have 20 people from my family coming. I have about this or that or that. Okay, then let's say all of these people will come along with maybe 2 friends. So let's double the number. What are you doing? You are gathering data. And so statistical data is important for planning. And on a broader scale, in a country like Ghana, we need something like this because essentially we must know how many people are in the country, the types of work they are doing, how many people are employed in the public sector, how many people are employed in the private sector. Even in the public sector, how many people are gainfully employed, earning what amount of money. When it comes to the availability of resources, how much estimated gold do we have in the earth? Okay, and how much are we extracting on every day? How much are we exporting? All of these things will help you to plan. Once again, because you cannot plan in vacuum, you need numbers, you need data for which you can plan for. If you know the number of people in Ghana currently, you can estimate and say, okay, so at this rate, in the next 10 years, this will be our number, and this will be the amount of electricity that we need. Every year we hear that our number is increasing, and so providing electricity becomes difficult. But if things were done correctly, with the population that they have, you know that there is something we call the population growth rate. They can then estimate and see, okay, so in the next 5 years, our population should reach maybe 34 or 35 million. If that is so, it means that we need this amount of electricity by that time. So that is for statistical data. The third thing that we need is incorrupt and efficient administration. Now, this is important because if whoever is managing your affairs is one corrupt, is inefficient or the team is inefficient, then there's a problem. Because you may have all the plans that you can draw it, but then if you don't have qualified people to execute the plans, then you can't move ahead. Or if you have the right people, but whoever is in charge of making the final decisions is a corrupt person, steals funds, misappropriates funds, and does not account for things, then there is a problem. So you need an incorrupt and efficient administration. You don't need a partial person, you need an impartial person. Is that okay? All right. Now, you also need the mobilization of resources. Now, there should be laid down policies and instruments for mobilizing resources which fulfill the financial outlay of development plans without inflationary and balance of payments pressures. So, if you need to conduct or implement any plan or policy and you have to go externally to borrow money, then you have a problem as a country. If you have to build a school, you call China. If you want to build a hospital, you call USA. If you want to construct roads, you call India. If you need to pay your workers, then you call the UK. Then there's a problem. Okay, so for successful planning, there must be a way of properly mobilizing resources, especially in terms of finance. Okay, to make sure that there will be no cost at the end of the day, because whatever loan that you take, whatever you do, you will pay. Whether in cash or kind, whatever you borrow, you will pay back at a point in time. And the payment can be in many forms. If it is money, definitely nobody will give you loan without interest. You're going to pay at a cost. Okay, or you may even be asked to pay back in certain resources like gold and what have you. Okay, but if you are able to mobilize your resources on your own, then you don't have any problem, because you constructed the road yourself, the school was built by yourself, you are paying everybody yourself, and so you don't owe anybody anything. And so mobilization of resources is one important thing for successful development planning. You also need a proper development policy. A proper development policy. Now, the state should lay down a proper development policy for the success of a development plan and to avoid any pitfalls that may arise in the development process. One main problem that we face as developing countries or underdeveloped countries is that we do not plan for contingencies. We do not plan for contingencies. We may have a plan, all right, but we don't plan for emergencies that may happen. For instance, as a country, you realize what happened when COVID struck. And it's not just as many countries. Even the developed countries were taken by surprise. How much more the developing countries or the underdeveloped countries? So there must be a proper development policy, which will then prepare for contingencies. And these plans should make sure that they cover every sector, such as the provision of adequate infrastructure, whether by public or private agencies, provision of specialized training facilities in terms of education or skills. You also need the legal framework for economic activity, especially laws relating to land tenure, corporations, and what have you. So you need more or less a holistic or comprehensive development plan or policy that captures everything. You also need laws to back it, because if you have a plan or a policy and you don't have laws to back it, anybody can decide to go against it. But if you have a legal framework, a regulatory framework that guides and protects the way things are done, first of all, people will even be scared to do something contrary. Or even when they do, they can be adequately addressed. All right. Set you have an economy administration, you also have public corporation and what have you. All of these things, as I told you, once you are able to get about 4 or 5 in your mind, you should be good to go. All right. So these ones, you can also read them for your understanding or for your own thing. Okay, now what are some problems of development planning? What we just looked at was what was required, the requisites for successful development planning. But then there are problems. Number one is inadequate statistical data. Many countries do not have enough statistical data. We as a country, Ghana, we are safe because if not for anything, almost every 10 years we conduct a population and housing census. And this census, although the name is the population and housing census, we've moved beyond that to include things like household income, expenditure, access to health, access to education. And so we have a more comprehensive data pool from which we can make different sorts of analysis from. Okay, but for many developing countries, they do not have such reliable statistical data. Okay, now it says that there are often gross errors in the estimation of accurate data in many fields of the economy, such as population, capital, labor, and many other things. Now, this is a major problem because if what you are relying on to draw your plans, remember, statistical data is one of the main requisites for successful development plans. And if what the data you have is unreliable, is inadequate, then you have a problem because you are planning for the wrong number of people or you are planning on the wrong data. All right. Secondly, you have uncertainties. Uncertainties is a major problem, as we said, on the inability to plan for contingencies. For instance, war can happen at any time. Natural disasters can happen at any time. Okay, inflation can happen at any time. Sometimes it may not even be your problem, but something that is happening somewhere. A funny example is what the previous administration was usually saying, that the economic recession in Ghana was as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic and also the Russia-Ukraine war. Okay, so although on the lighter side of things, you realize that something may be happening somewhere that can affect you. And so the inabilities to plan for uncertainties or contingencies is a major problem for development planning. Next, you have the lack of coordination between plan policies and annual budgets. So there's always some sort of contrast or a gap between the policies that we have and the annual budgets that we have. You realize that you have so many nice things on paper, but then you don't have the money to do it. What will happen if you don't have the money? You can't also say you not do it because you have promised the people you are going to do it. So what will you do? You realize that you then have to go and borrow. You then have to go and borrow. And the more you borrow, the worse your currency becomes, the more money you have to pay back, and the problem keeps compiling on and on and on. Okay, so that's one main problem of development plan, the lack of coordination between plan policies and then the annual budget. You have a plan, you have so many needs, but your means of achieving the needs are limited. All right. Next, you have the no control over private sector plan. It says that a development plan provides for schemes of allocation for both public and private sectors. Since the government is not in a position to fully control the private sector, the plan relating to the private sector is often not given the needed attention in terms of its implementation as per the physical targets and financial allocations. This creates problems for the success of the plan. So, in as much as we are advocating for the government to take a more central role, a more, important stance in the distribution and allocation of resources, this should not come at the expense of the private sector, because naturally there are certain things that the private sector can do and do best, especially in terms of business. When business and commerce is handled by the private sector, things get better because a private individual, of course, is naturally a profit maximizing person. And so whatever he or she must do to make sure that the profit is gained will be done. And that is essentially why something like telecommunications is not done by the government. It is handled by private companies like Telecel and what's the name, MTN and any other one. Although the government may have certain a level of control, but then certain things should be left to the private sector. But the moment you also leave the private sector to do things on their own too much, then it will lead to inequalities and then poverty. If you remember, it will lead to inequality and poverty because the private sector, they will have the resource and they are fewer. And so they are going to continue to get richer at the expense of the rest of the population. And there's also, lastly, the limitation of the use of models. So all of these theories that we've mentioned, the Christoller central location theory, von Thunen's model, the theories of development that we looked at yesterday, the modernization and the like, all of these things that we mentioned, they are developed in certain peculiar cultural contexts or conditions. They are prepared or developed in different countries with different levels of resource abundance, different environmental context, and everything. So if you want to come and implement such policies, such theories in Ghana, you must make the necessary adjustments. You can't go and carry von Thunen's model and come and dump it in Ghana and expect everybody to follow. There will be problems. But that is one main disadvantage or the one main challenge of development planning, because many of such policies, for instance, I hope you know that the big push, for instance, is not a theory developed by the current administration. It is a theory that was developed some time ago. But if you go and take such a theory without making the necessary adjustments to it, maybe the required level of investment and the timelines expected for it to be completed, if you don't make the necessary changes, the benefits that you require will not be achieved. And that is one main problem in developing countries, because such adjustments are not made. They just copy and paste the theory as they are seen. Okay, so I think we have come to the end of today's lecture as well. How many minutes did we use? We started, I think, around 6:10. So about an hour, 16 minutes that we've used so far. Is there any question? Is there any confusion? Okay, I think in the comment section, someone says, you will not be a spectator, but a citizen. A typical example is the whole airport. It's now a white elephant anyway. Yeah. So thank you very much for today. Is there any question, any confusion, any addition or subtraction?
Hello, Doc.
Yes, Vanessa.
Please, point 4. The point 4, I also disagree.
Point 4 under what?
The last point, that the private sector, concerning the private sector.
Okay, proceed.
I disagree. No control over private sector plan. I remember in the 90s, those days, telecommunication, it was only PNT, telecom. You to get access to landline in your house, if you have money and you don't have anybody to get it for you, anyone who has name, it's a problem. Later, Mobitel came and space phone. And when phone also came, it was very expensive. I remember one touch, you have to queue and the rest. But when other private sector also started coming in, now telecom, space phone also made, no, why am I getting, PNT made it flexible, and later it became cheap. So giving room to private sector, I also think it also makes things flexible for the citizens. If not MTN, why am I using MTN? Space phone. When they came, they were space phone coming in, bars and the rest. Telecommunication wouldn't have been easy. So I also disagree with that point 4.
Okay. Thank you, Vanessa. So essentially, you are right, though. You are right. But then the idea is that you give them room to operate, of course, but you also exercise a level of control. Take for instance what happened recently in the country. Remember what the communication minister, what's his name? The Ningo Pram Pram guy, I've forgotten his name. But
Honorable Sam George.
Sam George, yes, that's right, Sam George. So you remember what was going on? The idea was that because the economy was down and things were so expensive, these telecommunication companies were charging exorbitant fees for data and airtime. But now that the economy is better, income has sort of improved, things are a little more stabilized, they were refusing to reduce their prices. So in an economy where the private sector was given a free range to operate, then the government will be unable to tell these people what to do. But because the government then has some sort of control, then you can be able to regulate prices and console them and tell them, no, you can't be charging this amount of money. Okay, so the inability, the inability of certain developing governments, developing country governments to have a level of control in the private sector becomes problematic. Because as I said earlier, the private individuals, their mindset is simple: profit maximization. Whatever they must do to maximize profits, they will do. If it happens that it becomes detriment to your income or expenditure or something, they don't really matter. What they care of is maximizing their profits. So if you don't control them to a level, not to dictate to them what to do, but then you allow them to do what they are supposed to do, but then you control them, then things will be better. I think you added the example of DSTV. Yes, even today, DSTV, they are still under negotiations with the government, because if we allow them to do whatever they are supposed to do, there will be zero accountability, and charging of exorbitant fees will continue to, take place. So thank you for the analogy, Vanessa. Please, is there any other question? Any confusion, addition or subtraction? Eric?
Hello, sir.
Yes, sir.
I want to ask which of the system are we practicing? Is it the decentralized or the centralized? As Ghana, the country Ghana.
Okay. What do you think? What do you think, Eric? What do you think?
I think it's a mixture of both.
Yes. So essentially, we are practicing a mixture of both. So, but remember, we are more lenient towards the decentralized system, because in the decentralized system, it's not that every decision-making authority or power has been given to the lower levels. No, some of it has been given. And the mere fact that some authority has been given to you means that you are responsible to somebody. So which means you answer to somebody. Okay, so whatever you do at the end, you'll be accountable to the central government. Because upon everything, they are the ones who still give you the money. But they give you the money and then give you the power to use the money for what you want to use it for. Okay, so although we have elements of both the central and the decentralized, we are more lenient towards the decentralized, because power is given to some power. Some power has been given to the lower levels to do what they are supposed to do. I hope I've made it a little clearer for you. All right. Is there any other question? Okay.
Sir.
Yes, boss.
I have a problem. No, the problem is not a political science class, but since you are talking about planning, I want to ask this question: that why is it that every political party comes to power with their manifesto? Because
okay.
If it's like that, does it actually foster development?
Well, the whole idea is that a manifesto should outline what the political party intends to do. Remember, the political parties, they have ideologies, they have agenda that they push. For instance, the New Patriotic Party, if you have observed, they are more inclined towards capitalism, where private individuals are the one controlling things. But the NDC is more of a socialist government, where it's like more of the things will be handled by the states. I don't know if you've noticed. However, the essentially what should be ruling Ghana should be a long-term development plan. So something like 40-year plan, a 50-year plan, where every manifesto, even if there will be a change of government, every manifesto will then conform to the plan that you have, not the other way around. So you have a central, you have a broader goal or a broader agenda. So let's say over the next 40 years, we want to develop every road infrastructure in the country. One, we want to improve literacy to maybe 95%. We want to improve health and access to health facilities by 100%. That will be a 40-year development plan. Then the political parties, through their manifestos, will then come and say, okay, so this is our approach to it. NDC will come with theirs, MPP will come with theirs, CPP will come with theirs, okay? And then the Ghanaians will then decide, okay, of all the stories that you people are telling us, this is the person whose ideology or whose approach is better. But contrary to this, now our manifestos have become the actual plan that we are supposed to follow. So you have political parties coming in with different promises. We are going to do this, we are going to do that, forgetting that we need a broader goal where whether NPP comes in power, NDC comes to power, there will be an achievement because everything is being done to the benefit of Ghanaians. I hope you get it. And so let me know, let's not even go too much, otherwise we'll be doing more politics. So William, I think Eric was the one who asked the question here. Eric, I hope you're okay. William, yes, William, you can go ahead.
Yes, sir, mine is not a question. But what I would say is that Ghana, we are also doing a national plan. You know, the district assembly, the municipal, they do 5-year medium-term development plan, which is then consolidated at the national. So the National Development Commission bring all of them together. So every 5 years it is developed. Just that they have not put a name on it as a national plan, but we have been doing that at the district level, and then it is being captured at the national level. And when you also look at some of the organizations like National Youth Authority, YEA, and other ones, they also do it every 4 years. And even the NYA own is 10 years development plan that they develop. When it is 10 years, they develop another one. So I think we are doing that. Decentralization is also taking place in Ghana.
Yes, essentially. Thank you very much, Mr. Williams. So just as you said, we are indeed practicing more of decentralization in Ghana because the plans and everything are drawn at the lower levels.
Mr. Williams.
Yes, please.
Please, is it on paper or is on reality?
Hello.
Because I heard
reality.
Vision 2020. So it's not on paper. It's not on paper.
No, it's not on paper. It's real.
Anyway, the district I wouldn't want us to go too much into that. Otherwise, we'll be doing politics at that point. So, Madam Vanessa, I understand your grievances, but let's just stick to whatever we are doing for today. And then, so just as you said, we are, as we have discussed extensively, we are practicing more of a decentralized system. Okay, we are more of a decentralized system than a centralized system. A centralized system will be in a system where everything is done at the top. There are no middle levels, there are no local levels, and even if they exist, they can't do anything on their own. Like in the case of the drawing of the midterm development plan, for instance, they can't draw anything themselves. Every plan is done at the top and implemented, where we call it the top-down approach. But in a decentralized system, we call it the bottom-up. So just as Mr. William was talking about, the plans are drawn at the local level, at the lower levels, and then consolidated at the top. So a bottom-up approach. I hope that is clear. Yeah. Is that the last question for today? Yeah, okay. If that is the last question for today, then I will thank you once again for your time this evening. I know you may have had other things to do, but you allocated your time. So thank you very much for today. I hope to see you next week Sunday for our last meeting, and I hope and pray that everybody will be there on that day. On that day, if the time permits, okay, if the time permits, we will go through some sample questions. I'll eventually give you the questions online so that you can try your hands on them and prepare. So that you just prepare yourself for the quiz and for the exam as well. But then, if the time is available, we'll also go through it online. Okay, so thanks for your time this evening. Have a good evening. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you, sir.
We are most grateful, sir.
Mr. Ali, long time.